And we have arrived already to chapter number 6, called Human Nature in the World. We have seen in chapter number 5, Human Nature in Paradise, and we're going now down to the world, and we're going to delve into the fall, the version of the fall of the medieval philosopher John Scotus Eriugena, explained by DEIRDRE CARABINE in her work John Scotus Eriugena. So the consequences of the fall in relation to human nature are threefold: the propagation via sexual means, loss of intellect, and obscuring of the image of God within, which we're going to see in chapter number 7. Most important consequence of the fall is affected the creation of the body and the material world. So the consequence of the fall is that it is the cause, the fall is going to be the cause, is going to affect the creation of the body and the material world. So here comes the first confusion in all of this, because before we have spoken, so Eriugena is going to be slightly ambiguous about all this. He is going to tell us that the body is a consequence of the fall, that sexuality is a consequence of the fall, yet those two aspects are not going to be completely extricated from human nature. So we're going to try to see what he means by that. Irrational movement of human nature is the cause of all created material realities. Okay, so let's go back here to, we're going to go now to number 2. And number 2 says, now, the general nature of the fall is the sin of pride. Human nature lost divine image. Human nature lost the divine image within, and in so doing, lost its wholeness. Human nature did not enjoy a state of perfection because it turned from God as soon as it was created. When human nature turns towards Him, towards God, it preserves the beauty and integrity of its nature. But when it turns away from Him, it wastes and disfigures not only itself, but also that which is subject to it. So the earlier in the argument that God made human nature in the genus animal becomes clear, because He foresaw that He would come to live as an animal, and that He would fall from the beauty and dignity of the divine image into a life of irrational animal passion. So this is the chapter in which I'm most conflicted about what Eriugena is saying, apart from the fact that he's the most ambiguous, because he's been telling us that the animal part of it is part of human nature. Also that this very animal nature represents the part of the fall, the fallen, of which God has no responsibility. Only we do, only man does, Adam does. And yet, there was no real beginning for this fall. So the fall was intricated already in the divine creation, and God was actually so capable of predicting it that He predicted the consequences. He also created the consequences of the fall. Yeah. So following Gregory of Nyssa here, in God's creation of human nature, says that God also created the consequences of sin even before sin occurred, since it is an undeniable fact that God created all things simultaneously. So human nature before the fall had in it the prediction of the fall and its consequences. Yeah, so this comes in connection with what we spoke before about paradise being actually at the end, by the eschaton, not at the beginning, because the whole human nature and the whole world was created in an instant. Yeah, the principles by which all the laws that were going to reign over nature as it is created, as we see it and hear it and touch it and smell it and taste it, that was already predicted in there. So the fall seems to be predicted, seems to be part of creation, yet is not created by God, is created by the sin of man, and yet is paradise didn't really exist. Paradise comes in the end. So when we're talking about the beginning, we're talking about the end. Yeah, this seems to be what Eriugena is saying, which is going to be fascinating to explore when we actually read the book. Yeah, because this is just an introduction. Yeah, this lengthy series of videos is just an introduction, because I want to go through the extensive explanation of things. Yeah, in the TikTok era, what we need is long explorations of deep and important topics that go to the core of existence. All right, so where are we now? So number 3, we're going to go to number 3 here. And here I'm going to put full screen so you see it better. So God's foreknowledge, this foreknowledge that we've been talking about, is to explain away certain difficulties that arise in relation to the two creations of human nature. So remember, human nature had two different aspects that belong both to human nature, and yet there seems to be a contradiction, because it is the fall. Unless the fall is part of human nature, is the part in which man himself is responsible of his own actions. Yeah, the part that justifies and creates freedom. Okay, so God creates the world according to certain laws and principles. One of them must be freedom, therefore the fall is intrinsic to human existence, and sin is intrinsic to human existence, but God only will belong to those very essential laws, and we as free beings created in the image of God, we're capable of staying there or fall into sin and fall into materiality, and in this sort of dense reality in which we live in that keeps us far away, although not deterministically far away from that essence that God is. Okay, we're going to see that now. So the consequences of sin precede the actual deed of sin. This is very important. This means that moral law is actually eternal and precedes the life in which we're in. Yeah, we are not to decide that. Actually, what the tree and the science of good and evil, that's what it means in Genesis. It means that that's not for you to decide what is right and what is wrong. And when you eat from the apple, you're trying to dilucidate for yourself what is right and what is wrong, instead of getting to know what the rules are as embedded in the very fabric of creation. Yeah? So that's what it means. That's what it means in Genesis. Yeah, credit here to Mark Passio, who explained this in one of his presentations. So in God there is no time. So let's go back here actually. So it inverts the temporal order of events as related in Genesis. So again, the beginning is actually going to be the end. Paradise belongs to the end of the Bible actually. Human beings were not in paradise for any time before the fall, for if they had stayed there, they will have achieved some perfection. So the fall seems to be intrinsic to the beginning, into this journey that we need to go through in order to perfect ourselves. Yeah, and in this sense, this is actually very, very true. So the whole creation was simultaneous. Nothing before or after God. No past or future, nor even the passage between past and future. Yeah, there's nothing before or after God. Not a temporal interval between creation and the fall. So the fall seems to actually be intrinsic to creation, at least in this material realm in which we incarnate, and through the freedom that we have, it is sure that we are going to fall for the deceit of the senses, the deceit of sexuality, the deceit of the body, and that's what the fall represents, and we're going to have to try to transcend all of that. I am not sure because how justified this is, because it is within human nature to be an animal, to be that connection. So there seems to be a part of it that belongs to the fallen nature of man, but then there seems to be other part of it that seems to be completely natural. And we're going to see that there is certain ambiguity here in what Eriugena will be saying in the Periphyseon. Here's a quote here: for him, to God, all things are once present. So even the concept of time seems to be something that we perceive as something real, but within the fallen state. Yeah, because time actually wouldn't actually exist. So the temporal sequences, they result in the mutability of human thought. Sin belongs to human categories, not to God. Always a very important idea in Christianism. So let's go to the next one, will be number 4. Here we go. And how does this account by Eriugena relate to the story of creation in Genesis itself and its interpretation by other exegetes? Okay, so there is some influence here from Plotinus, which is a Neoplatonic philosopher, and also it evokes the fall of Sophia in the Gnostic myth. Through the accident of its transgression of the divine command, whereby it became forgetful both of itself and its creator, the mind is born unskilled and unwise. So we have two minds. We have the mind that is unskilled and unwise, and this is a big problem for all humans, this mind that seems to actually be in sabotaging everything we want and do and are. And on the other hand is the mind, the actual intellect at the essence of what we are, yeah, which can actually never know that what it is, but we cannot but know that it is. So ignorance of God then is one consequence of human nature, turning away from God into the darkness of ignorance. So human nature, which belongs together with divine nature, seems to have this other part, that is human nature turning away from God. Although God at the same time creates himself in everything that exists. Yeah? So my thoughts are that actually what we are confronting here is that in the nature of the physical world, in which there's this capacity for suffering, capacity, of course, in the negative sense, it is necessary in the sense that freedom will not be possible. We have to be able to choose between right and wrong, and this is intrinsically embedded into the fabric of this universe in which we live in, where there is pain, there is suffering, there is misery, and there is fear and all these negative emotions, and we bear this responsibility in which direction to go. This is important because as creatures we have to be able to choose between the two in order to be made at the image of God, to be creators, or at least be embedded or having the capacity to embed and understand and be at the level of the intellect of God within our nature, always not knowing exactly what it is, but knowing that it is, and morally choosing correctly. Yeah, this is extremely important. And of course it's easy for anyone to say who's not suffering that that's the meaning of suffering, but there is no other way. Otherwise, if everything was good, freedom would be impossible, and we wouldn't be conscious beings, really. So this is a little bit of my input into this thing, yeah, because Eriugena seems to be confronting this almost obligatory sort of how would you say this, contradiction or ambiguity, yeah. So the fall is considered an irrational, inexplicable movement. It is inexplicable, a movement that is outside human nature because it entails going against and abandoning the more exalted beauty of the divine image. There is also the sensual beauty, yeah, which will be part of the fall. So Eriugena is not going to be too tough on this. He's just going to say that this is a fact of life, and it is quite a wreck of a condition to be in, but we are not entirely separated from our essence because our essence belongs into the divine essence. So, okay, let's go to number 5 now. Let me get the technology correctly. Let's go here, exactly. Boom, boom. There you go. And now we are here again. However, human nature did not wish to sing. Yeah? Its creator did not wish to punish it either. So we're going to see how this is resolved. Human nature should not be viewed in a negative way. It should be viewed positively in the light of its primal creation, as it was established before the fall, before in ontological terms or in analytical terms, in the image of God. So this is very important. It's not because, let me get rid of the inspector here. It is not because let's just continue. I lose my train of thought with the technology. Okay, so human nature was deceived and blinded by its own depraved will, by the wrong use of the beauty of material objects. Yeah, the wrong use of the beauty of material objects. It was depraved by its own will. This is very important. This is what I was talking about before, that in order to have freedom, you have to have the will to choose, and it is always your choice when you behave more without morality. And there are consequences, because if there is a nature or in humanity, everything that goes against that, it must have consequences, yeah? Which is the tasting of forbidden fruit, bringing death to the soul. We have a quote here: in a condition in which she alludes in a mysterious way, through the ineffable dignity of her nature, every bodily sense and all mortal thought. Yeah, so mortal thoughts will be within that purview. Sin is the turning away from the Creator, abandoning the image of God to become like irrational mortal animals. So this is going too much towards animality, although I think there's more to it, because animals, they're not capable of evil, and yet human beings certainly are. He was lured by the attraction of the beauty of the senses, and in doing so turned away from his intellectual principle. Adam's sin was that he fell in love with woman in the sense of sense, and abandoned God. Eriugena makes frequent use of the allegorical interpretation of Adam as reason and Eve as sense, derived most likely from Philo of Alexandria through Ambrose of Milan. Just a detail there, historical detail. And we're going to go now to number 6. Here we go. Let me get out of here and get into here. Boom. Eriugena is clear that both man and woman together make up human nature. Just so he's not making a distinction here, where man is the main subject of humanity and woman like a sort of secondary extra kind of human being, but both make up human nature together. Woman was not created simply for assistance in the process of mortal generation, because the image of God in which the whole of human nature was made was free from all sexuality. So sexuality is going to have an ambiguous place in Eriugena's take on the fall in connection with human nature, as you're going to see. Because God foresaw that human nature will not wish to remain in the dignity of its natural state, God added the sexual division to its mortal nature. So you're going to see it's going to be like a curse, but also an opportunity. Yeah. So let us make woman, for it is not good that man should be alone. Apparently, Eriugena means this statement as being ironic, that man did not wish to remain alone, simple and perfect in his natural dignity as the image of God, but wished to propagate like the animals. Yeah, which the animal nature, remember, it was part of human nature. So what it comes to, I suspect, is actually ultimately comes to morality and the connection that it has with freedom. Yeah. In Eriugena we have the concept of freedom, and then we have the concept of grace. Yeah, freedom will be more within the realm of the physical, the realm where we need to demonstrate our morality, because it's the realm in which we can cause suffering and harm. And then there's the other part that is holy, in which the physicality will not be the problem, and in which the formulation will be through grace. Yeah. So the soul was deceived and the fall was accidental, not natural. Human nature knowingly abandoned the image of its creator. Did human nature turn willingly from God, or was it accidental? So in the light of the double creation of human nature, sin is foreign to the innate rationality of human nature that enables him to salvage the dignity of human nature, notwithstanding its moment of irrationality. So Eriugena is not too tough on us, shall we say. Okay, let's go here to number 7 here. Very good. This is always a little bit of a process. Let's see if I can fasten this. The exegesis, there's a typo here, let's correct it. Exegesis of the banishment of Adam and Eve from paradise. So Eriugena puts a lengthy passage into the mouth of God, saying that Adam's defense that the woman was to blame is sharply dismissed by God. Such a shift of guilt is no defense, but rather an aggravation of the offense. So blaming the woman doesn't fly. Similarly, however, Eve is chastised for attempting to transfer her guilt to the serpent. So this is a vivid rebuke, picture of God's rebuke to Adam, Eve, and the serpent, and extrapolates on the original text of Genesis. However, the banishment from paradise, God does not curse Adam and Eve, so the mind and interior sense. Yeah, so Adam will be allegory of the mind, and Eve will be an allegory of the interior sense, and both together will be in human nature. but he curses only the serpent, so the deceiver, yeah, which is the complete irrationality and corporeal sense. So God does not curse the things which he made, but blesses them. And mind and sense are both creations of God, and we have access to that in this world as we are. But carnal delight, the wrong use of earthly beauty and material things, is severely dealt with by God, since this was not created by God. Well, this is obvious in the case of molestation or attraction, sexual attraction to children, abortion, things like this. Yeah, things that happen in the physical that is related to the sensual, that comes also from perceiving the sense of the beauty of something, but taking it in the completely incorrect way, in immoral way. Yeah, in the sense that it harms the human being that has been the victim of that, and it does not mean sex within the boundaries of a marriage, for example, which we're going to see now. Which in the modern sense, of course, it will include also consent, yeah, consented relationships. Eriugena's exegesis of the Genesis text in relation to the fall. Let's see. Implication of sin, the implication of sin specifically in terms of the creation of male and female. Male and female are not the names of human nature, but are the result of its further division through disobedience. I don't understand, in all honesty, how something that was intrinsic to the nature of this world becomes disobedience. It's like the disobedience is going to happen, therefore everything has been set up so that certain laws applies to those who behave in an immoral way, because that capacity is going to be there from the beginning, the capacity to disobey. So practically from the moment that we start existing in this world, this disobedience takes place, which is a little bit too much to say, but it's actually true. It does happen in every case. So it wouldn't be so much as to justify the doctrine of original sin, although that would be the essence of it if it's true. But to be sure that because we have choices and because we live in a world that is obscure and morality and great principles and the truth is obscured from us and it's difficult to elucidate, that we are going to make mistakes. Yeah. So Eriugena's interpretation of the primal creation, following Gregory of Nyssa, states that human nature was created whole without further division. Irrational movement of sin created dissimilarly from the exemplar and the formlessness of imperfection in the further division of its whole nature into two parts. For as those leaves cast a shadow and shut out the rays of the sun, so our bodies both cast upon our souls the darkness of ignorance and keep out the knowledge of the truth. Nature makes a mortal mansion for itself from earthly matter. The fig leaves with which human nature covered its nakedness were made by itself and hide the divine image that is its natural substance. It's referring here to Genesis number 7, which says, "Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked." That is Adam and Eve. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Okay, let's go to the next one, which is number 9 already. Great. 2 to go. So, if paradise is human nature itself in the image of God, then the covering of its body with fig leaves is recorded out of sequence in Genesis, for this action is a consequence of sin. So as soon as it sinned, it fell away. So what Eriugena does is in terms of, he doesn't care about the sequence of when we read the Genesis, he doesn't care about the sequence of the story as in the time of the actual story, because he says that that's not the actual time. This is a way to explain something that happens in one instant. Yeah, and in the process of living, in the process of living for redemption, we aim for that paradise towards the end. Yeah, because from the get-go, the fall was there from the very moment that we existed on earth. As soon as it sinned, it fell away, lost the divine image, and was banished from paradise, that is, was separated from its true nature. So the body is mortal and corruptible. It cannot have been made by God, but through the irrational motions of the human soul. This contradicts what we saw in the last chapter. Yeah, so the body will actually be part of human nature. But what happened to its first body? The first incorruptible body of human nature is still hidden in the secret recesses of nature. So there is a body that is not a body, and then there is the body that belongs to the fall. Yeah, this for a modern mind is confusing. So maybe it was completely self-evident for a medieval, early medieval person, but I don't think for us. We'll have to solve these difficulties here, through which the fault of Adam and Eve might be purged. So let's go here. Actually, we should go here. However, yeah, this is a big however. Because of his fundamental belief in the goodness of human nature as in the image of God, Eriugena argues that the Creator did not wish to punish it. Yeah? So God simply added a corporeal body through which the fault of Adam and Eve might be purged. So the fault of Adam and Eve is purged through this world. This is getting very interesting. So this fundamental optimism in Eriugena's conception of human nature. So there is a fundamental optimism of what we essentially are, but there are in him frequent portrayals of that nature in comparison with its former status. In the primal creation, it was blessed, rich, and eternal, and had everlasting life. It was wise, spiritual, and heavenly, and had eternal youth, and was happy, saved, and prudent. Now it is wretched, needy, temporal, mortal, foolish, animal, and earthly, and will grow old, and is lost and prodigal. Okay. So human nature was not banished from paradise into the world through God's anger or through revenge, but as a kind of ineffable teaching and incomprehensible clemency. Okay, so the place where we're in is part of the clemency of God, even within the enormous, incredible suffering that we put ourselves in. Yeah, this is for sure that it is our responsibility. So sexually then is a division. It's a movement from wholeness, and is part of the payment for the sin of disobedience. All right, this is an interesting take. However, he does say that sex is not necessarily a bad thing. Indeed, it cannot be so, because it was created by God. So here you have like the dichotomy within the dichotomy. So we have human nature as partly divine and partly animal, and that's within human nature. And then the animal part is obviously partly created by God, but also created by the fall of man. So it seems to be imbued in the very nature of creation. And again, I think it will be very important to analyze as to why that is, the connection it has with morality and freedom. So thus, while we must understand sexual division as a deviation from the wholeness in which human nature was originally created, the problem for the modern mind is like, how do you conceive of that? Yes, we understand that there is an ultimate cause, that there is an ultimate being that has nothing to do with pure physicality, and that is the origin of life. Yeah, ultimately it is spiritual, but it for us, I would say for most of us, it will be, so sexuality will be a natural consequence, a natural ripple effect of that fundamental essence that spreads through creation in a way that brings more and more beings into existence in order to fulfill its nature through this life and aiming towards God in a progressive manner. That would be something that would make more sense. Was originally created, and I'm not trying to say that that's the correct definition. So I'm just trying to expose the sort of difficulties that a modern mind has with this text without making a judgment. It's just simply the difficulties that one finds when one is confronted with this version of sexuality. Yeah, because we do not know any other way of being in the world. Yeah, and and procreation is the obvious sustenance of humanity as a race. Yeah. So it was originally created, and as a penalty for transgression, marriage and procreation should not be regarded in a bad light. So there you have it. Human nature maybe have created its own body, but it did not make the initial division into the sexes. So there seems to have been a physical primordial body of humanity, and then it was separated into the sexes. That was added by God in order to facilitate generation. So you see, you have this ambiguity again. It's like sex is good, but it's actually part of nature, so there must be good as well, and so on and so forth. We'll keep exploring all this. So that was the first part of chapter number 6 of Deirdre Carabine's John Scotus Eriugena. Thank you very much.